Today marks 97 years since World War I ended, 96 years since we first set aside this day to honor and thank our nation's veterans. More than 19 million men and women across the U.S. We have more than 1.3 million active duty military members, some in Iraq, Afghanistan, and soon Syria. We'll get to those issues in a minute. But we'll start in Marblehead, where a Veterans Day town hall was held, to which all community members were invited, and veterans were asked to speak about their experiences both in combat and at home. Join me now are the three men behind this whole thing. Congressman Seth Moulton organized today's event in his hometown of Marblehead. He also served 4 tours as a Marine in Iraq. Good to see you again, Congressman. Retired Colonel Andrew Bacevich, who facilitated the event. He served both in Vietnam and Iraq, now Professor Emeritus at BU. Good to see you as well. And Sebastian Younger, author, filmmaker, journalist, who's covered war for more than 20 years, including Afghanistan, where he filmed the documentary Restrepo, along with his good friend Tim Hetherington, who was killed while covering the Libyan civil war. Today's town hall was inspired by an article Younger wrote in Vanity Fair. He's a Belmont native, too. Good to see all three of you. So in that piece, Sebastian, it was about PTSD. Yep. It ended with you calling, I think, for events like this, you were citing models like, I think it was Native American community, where people who'd fought shared their stories of combat with other members in the community. Did I get that right, by the way?
That's exactly.
Why did you think this would be a healthy exercise?
Well, I had this idea that if you live in a cohesive tribal community, you probably recover more quickly from trauma. And I looked into anthropology and basically confirmed that. In a modern society, it's less cohesive, and so maybe that's part of what keeps people traumatized for long periods of time. So in Native societies, like the American Indians, there are ceremonies that happen after war, after warriors come back from combat, and they often involve, well, they involve the whole community, and they often involve, across many different cultures, they often involve the warrior reciting what he did on the battlefield, often quite triumphantly. But I just thought there was, if it's that common and that ancient, there's probably something therapeutic to it, that you sort of unburden yourself of what happened out there to the people that you fought for. And that makes them join spiritually. They become part of the combat as well.
Did it work?
I gotta tell you, Jim, it was incredible. It was unbelievably moving. The stories that came out that veterans were willing to share, both the ones who volunteered to come and share their stories at the beginning, and then those who just stood up after the volunteers ended and just said, you know what, I'm going to share my story.
Was it a healthy mix of veterans and people who hadn't served as well from the community?
It was, absolutely. I mean, there were a lot of members of the community there. And that's what we're trying to do, is just bridge that divide between veterans and the communities that we fought for.
I hope I'm not outing you with something you said right before we went on the air. I apologize in advance. You said you were a little skeptical in advance. Is it okay that I said that? Are you still skeptical?
No, I think the congressman is correct. It was a remarkable event. And the credit is due to the people who were willing to tell their story. And I think the key that made it successful was the variety of viewpoints. I mean, there were people who bore witness to their service because they remain proud. There were people who bore witness to their service because they remain deeply angry at a government that they believe lied to them or let them down. And I think there were some number of people, and I think it would be more the more recent veterans who are clearly still grappling with this experience, trying to come to terms with what I did, what I saw, and what it all means.
Well, you've all been there in different capacities. I am not. You're a one-percenter, Andrew Bacevich. I don't mean in terms of wealth. You obviously were in the military. Your kid gave his life. When you hear people like me say we support our troops and then do virtually nothing, what kind of reaction do you have?
Well, I don't know that you're accurately describing yourself, but I mean, my reaction to that support the troops rhetoric is one that comes pretty close to revulsion. I mean, let us emphasize that it's far better for the people to say thank you for your service than for the people to ignore or even revile those who served. But the problem, and I'm certainly not the first person to make this point, is that it's about that deep. And the challenge, I think, and I know the congressman is taking this on. The challenge is really to grapple with what ought to be a citizen's responsibility to soldiers in an era when so few of us as citizens actually serve.
Well, I want to get you touch on this at the end. I asked your buddy here, Seth Moulton, the other day about how he felt about Charlie Rangel's proposal that he introduces every year, the congressman from Harlem, about reinstituting a draft. And it's not because he expects there to be a military draft, but because there's no skin in the game for people like me. We don't pay for the war. It's all off budget. We don't have family members who put their lives at risk. Do you buy into that notion that there'd be some level of military or civilian service so we'd have a shared experience? Would that change this dynamic?
Well, in World War II, something like 12% of the nation was in uniform at some point. I don't think we want a 10 million person army, and we can't afford it. That's not really the solution. But I think the people that don't serve, first of all, there could be a kind of national service that is not necessarily military, but some kind of national service.
But mandatory.
Right. That might be very healthy for the country.
Do you both agree with that concept? Starting with you?
Emphatically. And that said, there are complications with that idea. If the annual cohort of 18-year-olds is several million people, we need to have several million good things for them to spend a year or two doing. But conceptually, it seems to me, at the very least, conceptually, it ought to be one of those things that is on the nation's agenda. It's the kind of thing that ought to be discussed in a presidential campaign, acknowledging that no,
or
it
on
won't
the floor
be.
of the House of Representatives?
Yes, of course.
How about it?
Well, look, I'm a strong advocate for national service. Now, I don't think it has to be mandatory. In fact, there are about 5.5 AmeriCorps applicants for every one AmeriCorps slot today in America. General McChrystal, who's a leader of this movement, talks about getting to a point where it's just a societal expectation. When you apply for a job when you're 30, one of the first questions will be, where did you serve? Just because it's an expectation. I think we can get there, but it's going to take some work.
Can we talk about the future and limiting the number of men and women who put their lives at risk and come back with PTSD? You have written extensively that these forays into the Middle East, and these aren't your words, they're mine, are fool's errands. We can't impose our will on other societies. We've got to have a different strategy. If that's a correct what is the different strategy? For people who fear ISIS and fear it even more if it planted a bomb on that plane, what's the strategy other than that which we're practicing?
The strategy begins with having a realistic evaluation of the threat. There obviously is a threat. Islamic radicalism is a real thing, but it's not a threat akin to that posed by Nazi Germany. And it is a threat for which military power, I think, provides a very limited antidote. The truth is that it's actually much more of a police problem. That is to say, not the cops in Boston, but what's required is an international police effort to identify and dismantle these networks so that they cannot do us any harm.
Senator Obama ran pledging to end 2 wars, and the likelihood is President Obama is going to leave a successor with 3 wars. You've been harshly critical of this move to have up to whatever it is, 50 special ops forces in Syria. What's the alternative there?
Well, I agree with the professor that we need a serious strategy, and it means a political plan, a diplomatic plan, a plan to meet ISIS on social media where they're so effective at recruiting. If we don't have a plan like that, then whatever work those 50 special forces do, it'll just go to waste because we won't be able to secure the peace.
You make it unanimous on this?
Yeah, I generally agree with all of that. Yeah, absolutely.
Generally suggest that there's a piece of it that you don't buy into. You spent a lot of time in Afghanistan.
I feel like I have to say generally just because it's such a complex thing, and I don't think any of us here can actually totally nail it. I started going to Afghanistan in the mid-'90s. It was a country that I was very fond of. 9/11 happened. I think we got caught with our pants down in a way. I think we really did have to respond to the threat that was coming out of Afghanistan. Killed 3,000 Americans. Very obviously there was a problem there. Where I think it got complicated and conflicted in this country was Iraq. I think the decision to go into Iraq really kind of ruined the conversation in some ways about a positive intervention in a country, Afghanistan, that desperately needed help.
Is your goal here, gentlemen, to replicate, was this a one and done kind of thing, or is the hope that essentially what you all did today, what you wrote about and you helped lead, spreads around this country. Is that the goal here, Seth Moulton?
Absolutely. It was such a success. I hope that next year we see cities and towns across the country holding veterans town halls like we did in Marblehead today.
Does the formerly skeptical Andrew Bacevich buy into that? Is that something we should do across this country?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if to the extent that I was skeptical, I mean that was washed away. This was an astonishingly well thought out event. Again, to emphasize, the credit goes to the veterans who were willing to stand up and tell their story.
And it came out of your head. You're with them on this too, right?
You know, it came out of the Native Americans. Actually, I just did my research and I thought you might be able to translate that into modern American society.
Well, I hope your desires become true. I hope it happens again. And congratulations on today, gentlemen. Congratulations all the veterans who spoke. Good to see you, Congressman.
Good to see you too.
Andrew Bacevich. Good to
you very
see
much.
you. Sebastian Younger.
Thank you.
Great to see you as well. Thanks so much.